Hi, Sadikchya. Welcome to Ahead Dialogues.
Thank you so much, Akanksha, and really great to be here.
It's really amazing that you could take out time, and with the time difference and everything, I'm really happy to have you here. And I want to let our audience know that we're talking about Sustainable Fashion 101 today. So it is definitely going to be 101. So before we begin, I would like to tell my audience that we'll start with some generic questions on the subject, and then we'll move on to more nuanced, pointed issues on the particular subject that we are talking about, sustainable fashion, so that anyone who's listening to us for the first time or listening to this particular area of discussion for the first time, even they can get some sort of idea what sustainable fashion is. So let's begin.
Yeah.
Sadikchya, you are in this field and you have a lot of experience, but I want to start with a very generic, basic book type question. Sustainability and fashion, we've heard these terms more often separately than together. So I want to know from you that what exactly sustainable fashion is.
Right. I think before moving into sustainable fashion, I want to touch upon sustainability or sustainable as a word. And it's very interesting. It's used everywhere. It's a buzzword, but not just in fashion, but throughout, different sustainable buildings, sustainable infrastructure, sustainable society. It's used everywhere, but this word is neither protected nor controlled, which means that it doesn't have any legal significance to it. There's no restriction. And because there is not a single universally accepted definition of sustainable or sustainability, anyone can use it freely without any licenses, without any kind of permissions. And what this has done is led to confusion between green and sustainable. So it's used interchangeably. I mean, green typically refers to eco-friendly practices, and environmental aspect is a big component of sustainability. But then it's a holistic approach, as in it involves three different aspects. That's environmental, yes, but also economic and social aspects. So I think that is very important when we talk about sustainable fashion. It's not just eco-friendly practices, but it's all kind of practices and products in the fashion and the textile industry that prioritize environmental, but also social and economic responsibilities across the entire life cycle. So this means like using eco-friendly materials, yes, waste and pollution reduction, but also ethical labor practices, resource efficiency and financial viability so that businesses can generate profits for continued operations and growth. So I think that's what sustainable fashion is to me. It's like a holistic approach.
Interesting. I was reading a bit about sustainable fashion, and I found it quite difficult to find a consolidated answer as to what exactly it is. And what you just said right now covers everything that sustainable fashion means. I totally loved what you said right now. So thank you for making it very descriptive for us. Since you talked about a lot of different aspects that sustainability on its own includes, where economic being one, and of course labor practices being one, I want to bring into light fast fashion brands, which are greatly emerging and sort of ruling the industry right now. In a very basic format, I just want to know that does the sustainable fashion world and fast fashion world, are they two explicitly different worlds, or can they collide sometimes? What I mean to say is that if fast fashion brands also start adopting sustainable practices, does that mean that their business as usual has to completely change, their business model has to change, there are huge cost implications, or is there a way that we can see synergies?
I mean, the world of fast fashion and sustainable fashion is very different, is wildly different. I think whatever I talked about, what sustainable fashion includes, it's exactly the opposite. So we're not looking at durability, we're not looking at recyclability, we're looking at production speed, we're looking at production volume. which is resource intensive, not resource efficient at all, and which leads to all this waste that the fashion industry is so associated with, all these environmental impacts. And in the social aspect, there's another thing. Fast fashion has been criticized and is known for exploiting low wage labor in developing countries and less developed parts of the world. So it's a different world, yes. But for fast fashion to collide with sustainable fashion, I think it's not like, can it like really collide? But it has to collide because there is no choice now. Two reasons for this. I think first is consumer demands. More and more customers understand their consumption habits and how it can affect the climate. So there's this growing customer base that would consider use of sustainable materials, sustainability as a very important aspect when they purchase stuff. And yes, this may not be the case for all the countries in the world. And that is why the second thing I'm going to talk about is the laws and regulations in sustainable fashion. They're imminent. And that is going to not only affect the European Union or UK or US or all the developed countries, but also the developing countries and less developed parts of the world, because it's going to really have that, trickle down effect. And I think these laws and regulations all come from the targets that the countries have set when they're reaching for net zero. All of these countries have like different goals, 2050, 2030. And fashion is going to be an important part of it. Fashion is responsible for 10% of global carbon dioxide emissions. And it's going to be, will have dire consequences if we do not look into it. So EU has made huge strides in that. There have been laws and regulations, but all of this is going to really affect fast fashion, all the companies that's out there, that's everywhere, and they have to sort of collide with it. And like you mentioned, there will be cost, there will be supply chain implication, because things are going to happen differently, and there is a shift. And when changes are happening, it's always difficult to navigate because you're used to doing things in a certain manner, and you're changing directions, which is going to be, it's going to be hard to navigate. But I also think that change is the area which can be navigated with creativity and innovation. For this example, I think I recently stumbled upon this news where Zara, which is a fast fashion retailer, what it's been doing is they've been leveraging AI and data analytics. So how they're doing is very simply, they have these tags with microchips that they use on their products, the garments, and they monitor the journey of these garments from the warehouses to the stores. And what this does, it gives them like this comprehensive view of inventory. And they use all this data to tailor designs on what the customer prefers or what the customer demands. And this is going to be different in different geographical area. What is here in the UK could be very different from France or Spain for that matter. So unlike competitors that commit 100% of their designs ahead of a season, what Zara does is it only designs 15% to like 30% beforehand and creates over 50% of items in real time based on popularity, based on preferences. So you can see like how a fast fashion brand is leveraging AI, leveraging innovation to do that demand tracking. So it is being done. I think it's, it's a matter of how scalable and how the other fast fashion brands are doing. And there might be like other examples as well, but I think this is a very good example to see how this all can be managed. And those two worlds are like possible to really live together in a very harmonious manner. So, yeah.
Interesting, very, very interesting. It's very true. I agree with you that change has to come and we have to address it. While talking about change, I want to get another perspective from you. I was reading somewhere that, interestingly, us as buyers, our fashion consumption has drastically increased over the past 15 years. We are almost consuming 60% more than what we were before. Thanks to whatever, thanks to more time and or probably more income at our hands. On one hand, it's good for the economy, but not so good for the environment, obviously, since not many people are investing in sustainable brands. And so I want to know that, does a consumer having a minimalist approach towards investing rather than just buying clothes also aid the goal of sustainability? And what are the other things that us consumers, we should keep in mind while doing a bit towards it?
I mean, yes, definitely consumer preferences have a huge influence in the fashion industry. Like the example, like I provided, like what you prefer can be used and then to kind of really provide you with something that is more customized to your needs, to your preferences. So yes, and it's a very supply and demand game, right? You state your preferences, you state your interests, you say that I want this in my product. And of course, like it's not just a single person, there has to be a collective voice. But then the fashion industry is going to listen to you, and they will have to step up to that. But I think having said that, I would say that the customer is only one part. There's so much you can do. Of course, like I think for me personally, what the journey has been is I have used fast fashion. I'm like, it's all there out there. It's so easy. Like you purchase it and like you see all these trends, you are going to be influenced by that. And I think for me personally, what I've done is like try to incorporate more timeless pieces. I think what we've talked about, like the stripes are always going to be there. So how I can pair it up with something that is always going to be in trend. That's not going to be something that I wear for one season and be like, no, this is not something I'm going to wear. It's going to be a fashion pop or something. So I think that is definitely customers can do that. But it's again, like it's just one part. The whole system has to be involved and the whole system has to work in the interest of the customers for this to work. Well, like I mentioned, sustainability is a holistic approach. And I think for us to be achieving it in today's world, it will require participation of all stakeholders. And it has to be something that is systemic, inclusive, and a scalable sort of approach. For example, like participation of government. Let's start off with that, with all the laws and regulations. So manufacturers and brands are accountable towards their customers towards what they're putting out there, the impact of their products. I think a good example of this is reshore manufacturing, which is shifting the production to one's own country. And India has done an amazing job in that. In the sense, they have reduced tax rate for companies manufacturing within India. So there is an imperative, but it's also incentive for brands to like really, do something that the customers would prefer. And I mentioned participation of government. I did not mention regulations from government, because for regulations to work, the entire value chain has to support it and they have to look forward to it. Because for change to happen, there's a very big component of change management, that is commitment to change, and the stakeholders have to be in it. So I think it's different. Everything has to work together to really make sure that what the customer prefers is there, and it's going to look very different for different countries. Like I think all of us, I think it's for me as well, whenever I thought about sustainable fashion, like EU is so ahead and there's a block of countries and it's doing so great. But even within EU, there are different systems for extended producer responsibility in fashion. So which shows that every country is going to have its own journey. It's what the stakeholders within that particular sector is going to require, what are their needs, and just making sure that all of that is somehow it somehow blends with customers' preferences and needs as well. So I think that's what is required.
Very interesting. I'm really happy that you brought about the fact that it's all the stakeholders who have to share the responsibility, which brings me to a more pointed direction towards the discussion that we are taking. I was reading this article by Harper's Bazaar where they were giving sort of a detailed guide towards sustainability. And like you were talking about stakeholders, interestingly, the entire article, it just went on and on and on about certain things that the consumers should do. They should buy trans-seasonal clothes, they should find good tailors if something happens to their
Mm.
clothes, and donate their clothes. I mean, I agree with all of this. It is absolutely important, and part a very important part of what the consumers, what the buyers in the fashion world should be doing. But do you think that this perspective somewhere comes from a very privileged point of view, where we assume that each and every
Mhm.
buyer of fashion or consumer of fashion has that kind of money, has that kind of time at their disposal? And do you think that, as you were right now telling us, that it's the part
Mhm.
of all the stakeholders have to take part in this? So do you think that it's okay to shift all the burden on the consumer's shoulder? And what specifically the brands, they need to definitely do their part, and what is the ratio in which this burden can be shared between brands and consumers?
It's a very interesting question because yes, I think customers are, like a huge part of it, and we've talked about preferences and needs, but no, definitely not. Like it's not just customers. It's like I said, it's a very holistic approach, and it will involve the brands because there's so much like you can do. Like we, talked about. It's you walk into a mall and then you see all these fast fashion, and it's like sometimes so easy. Like you prefer an item. I remember, like, I think last month I had to get these black blazers, and I was like, I knew what I wanted, and I wouldn't like probably invest time and, like go into like specifically reaching out for brands, like, searching for brands that would have like sustainable materials because it's easy, like, time convenient. So there's only so much that a customer can do. And brands definitely have a very huge role to play in it. And I think, like we talked about, fast fashion brands, because they're everywhere. So how can they make it easier for us? I think first is integrity. And I know it's a very difficult area to really be accountable for your actions, for the impacts that you have created, like of products and of activities across the value chain for brands. And I've mentioned value chain because it's not supply chain. It's not just the logistics part of it. It's not just like, from raw materials to products, but from products to the end of life of that product. So where does it go? So to really understand the entire value chain for brands, because it's not just, like you're not just putting a product out there. It has its consequences. It has its impact. So I think to really have that, to really lead with integrity. And I think the second is to work towards changing those unsustainable practices currently in their system. So, which means maybe like, using sustainable and eco-friendly material, maybe reducing waste. How can they leverage material innovation, AI, like we talked about, fair labor practices, and setting targets for reduced carbon emissions, all of that, like all sustainable practices. But again, having that integrity and seeking third party certification, because what we've seen is brands would be like, oh, this is sustainable, this is eco-friendly, but what does that really mean? And you can't verify it yourself. You need to have a certain standard, a certification that would tell that yes, this product is sustainable, is made up of like 100% eco-friendly materials, organic materials. There has to be something, it has to come from a third party certification rather than them just like kind of putting out their claims there. So that would be the second step. Third, like I said, leveraging innovation. There's so much out there. There's real-time demand tracking, like I said. Adidas has worked on this speed factory, which was not a success. But what they do is they kind of use AI to understand what the customer, like, to kind of come up with customized designs for their customers. So all of that is happening. And there's so much out there that you can take. Like even I think recently I learned that there's this company which has been doing eco-friendly and compostable sequins. And for me, that was like, oh my God, I never thought about it because 100% of those like sequins are made up of plastic products, and we use that like it's like for any kind of bling items for parties and all of that. We have that. So I think is so much out there that you can really use in your products, and yeah, just leveraging all the material innovation that's out there. And finally, collaborating, because I think that's where, things happen. It's not just brands doing something, but for the brands also to voice out what they need, or what is the kind of change the system expects from them, but also incentives that they need, to work with industry associations, NGOs, government agencies to really collectively address the challenges in the fashion industry. So I think those are the few steps that maybe a brand can possibly take.
Interesting, interesting. Along the same lines, I was reading a piece by Harvard Business Review where they said that uh, less unsustainable is not sustainable. And that completely changed my perspective. And then they, of course, they went on talking about that a lot of times brand, as you said, brands, they lack that kind of integrity. They profess sustainability, but what exactly is sustainability? They say that they
Hmm.
recycle, they reuse, they have the option to recycle and reuse the clothes they are selling. But is that really impacting the environment in the positive way that we are looking for? So I just want to know your perspective that, do you think that the lack of awareness, again, I'm coming back to consumers, the
Mhm.
lack of awareness amongst us customers, amongst us buyers, is also somewhere exploited by the brands? And what are the ways that we need to definitely increase the awareness amongst buyers, and tell them that this is sustainable and this is definitely not sustainable?
I think, it's definitely customers, it's been exploited, yes. And it's funny because brands are putting out there, like, putting like, okay, for example, like even the tags would have like green signs or like a leaf sign, right? And what attracts is what is going to sell. And they're really like, maximizing as much as they can, the advertising and all of that. And I think that's where the practice of greenwashing comes. It's basically how brands have been using exaggerated or false claims about environmental friendliness of their products and services when it's not there. And there can be several types of these greenwashing. There's hidden trade-offs when they're emphasizing on one positive aspect while ignoring the negative ones completely. That's not even there, like, and there's vagueness, using broad and vague terms like eco-friendly or like the green, leaf, whatever, and sustainable again, like they're without any clear definitions. There's false labels. There have been brands which have been making unverified claims through misleading certificates. So all of this is, like it's happening. Greenwashing, green hushing as well, in the sense that they're so afraid that, like things are going to happen to their brand that they just stop. Like, they don't put out any material, anything out there. So I think there's just so many things attached to this. Yes, customers, they're really exploiting the way consumers, take in information. And it's something that I think, as much as the customers, brands have an imperative to work on it. Yes, for consumers, it's important to understand what, like to really question, okay, you mean sustainable, what is sustainable? You meant 100% eco-friendly, what do you mean by that? I think there these questions that they can ask, but for things to be clear, but for things to work, it's really important that the brands work on it. I think for this, it's a solution to this is clear and transparent reporting on sustainability. And there are four pillars to this. There should be traceability. They have to ensure that the entire supply chain can be traced back to its source. Transparency, very open disclosure of sustainable practices, whatever things that they're kind of like claiming. Reliability means like kind of delivering on sustainability promises that they have made. And finally, accessibility, making those information readily available. When customers are wanting those information, you should have that kind of like, evidence to, make those claims. But for brands to be pushed towards these practices, there should be regulations again. And I would like to cite an example of EU for this, because they're coming up with a directive on green claims, how you can make sustainable claims on your products and services. And what this requires is companies to support claims that they have been making about their products using science-based and verifiable methods. So you can't just, come up with terms like green and eco-friendly. You have to support it with evidence, which means like maybe having a life cycle assessment method, using certifications, and really providing those kind of evidence and making it accessible. In France, in fact, there is a law under which companies can be fined up to 80% of their revenue for like false campaign costs. And I think these all practices will really, make it imperative for the brands to put in, those kind of practices in their businesses. So I think all of these is going to help customers recognize genuine sustainability efforts, because there's so much out there. There's so many standards. I actually did a piece on all the standards and certifications that a fashion brand or a manufacturer can can come up with, and there's so much out there. It's impossible for a customer to be knowing all about this. I mean, of course, like if you have interest in the field, but again, I think it's important that the fashion industry makes it easy for the customers. But consumers also keep asking that question. Just because it's sustainable doesn't mean it's sustainable. Yeah.
Interesting. Just because it means it says that it's sustainable, it doesn't mean that it is sustainable. Definitely. That's the phrase we have for today. And, we spoke about brands, we spoke about customers. I just want to end this discussion by asking your opinion. What advice would you want to give to young fashion aspirants and enthusiasts and designers? What should be their bit towards sustainability? Because, of course, it has to start from the beginning.
Right. I think it's a very interesting question, because there's so much out there. There's so many things that you can do. But I think the first thing is really integrity and honesty to self. That all of that comes from there, because you are accountable for your own actions. You're accountable for what you do, accountable for what you put out there. Like I mentioned, I've shopped from fast fashion, but understanding what that means for me. I will keep falling into the trap. I will keep buying all those fast fashion items, but it's not helping the climate. So I think for me, this realization happened, I think like January this year, when I was writing in my journal, and I was like, I'm going to okay, I'll go to the mall, I'll buy something. It's going to keep changing. So I deleted all the apps, and I'm not kidding, Akanksha. I deleted everything, and I was like, no, this is not helping. It's not helping my budget as well. So I think that's also one thing. So I started investing in timeless like staple pieces, and something that can be paired up with everything. And I also did this color analysis by myself, what works for me, and what is something that I would want to wear. So I think really having that for me was so important, because it is something that's aligned with my values of sustainability. So you can take those steps as an individual, as a fashion aspirant. I have been doing more second-hand charity shops, all that shopping here, because I think it's easier also to, here, but I'm not sure how easy it is in India. It's definitely not that easy in Nepal. It's growing, but, it's not out there like it's in the UK and the EU. So really understanding how I can do that at a personal level, but as a part of the, entire value chain, as a designer, I think it's really important to understand how you facilitate the system to really gain more knowledge of what's out there, what laws and regulations are there. Well, how is it going to affect you? Because like I said, okay, sometimes there's a misconception that, it's just the Western part of the world. It's that privileged mindset, but those regulations are going to affect businesses in India and in Nepal. If they're exporting to these countries, you're bound by those regulations. And for businesses, you only want to grow. You only want to keep on exploring new exporting areas and all of that. So I think it's really important to understand what's out there, what's happening, how you can be a part of the system how you can turn your business to a more sustainable one, and what certification and standards, again, you can seek for your products or businesses. Because I think we've been talking about certification standards, but what is the one that your business really needs? Or like, your particular, for example, like, if you're using organic fibers, there are standards out there. How can you match it up to those levels so that you can use it and then you can leverage that to grow your customer base? So I think it's really understanding the system, understanding what's out there, and really being honest to yourself. I think that is a very hard and difficult journey, but if you do that, I think it's easier when you make choices because you're doing right for the environment. So I think that's about it, I would say.
Interesting, interesting. It was very, very enlightening, Sadikchya, and lightning as well. Everything that you said, it has opened up my mind, and you've brought out some really interesting, as at the same time very basic things that we need to keep in mind, like honesty, like integrity. Absolutely, and I believe personally, everyone is part of the industry, not just designers, not just brands. I mean, if you're wearing clothes, you're part of it.
Exactly.
So you have a role to play, and especially for us who hail from the Southeast Asian part of the world, we have so many regional fabrics. We have culturally, we have that sustainable mindset. We've always had that historically with us.
All the repairs as well, right? It's so difficult to find the repair shops here.
Absolutely.
I hate that because I'm a short person and I need to get my trousers tailored, and you won't find it here.
Yes.
So, exactly. We have that in our culture because we tailor stuff,
Absolutely. So I think it's upon us to make that more trendy. Make fabrics which are traditionally sustainable, which are homegrown fabrics, which were sewn in the villages, in the countrysides by our own hands, by our grandmothers. Make them trendy. So we have a lot of work to do, and we definitely have to walk the talk, I believe.
Yeah.
And it definitely, for sure, after this discussion, I'm even more sure that it starts with people like you who are doing an amazing job in the field.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you so much, Sadikchya, for taking out time today. And it has been amazing to listen to you talk about sustainable fashion. Very dread serious topic, but you're so passionate about it, and you make it very exciting.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure to be talking about it. I think, I was very excited when, we're talking about this conversation. And it's, like you said, it's dreadful out there, but we all have a role to play. I think it makes us more exciting that, okay, it's not just something that I can leave, not just passing the buck, but then it's under my control as well. So, no, I think it's a dreadful but exciting journey, and there's a lot to be done, and it will be done. So just keeping keeping my fingers crossed for everything good that's coming our way.
Definitely. Here's to a more sustainable, clean, and bright and good future.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you, Sadikchya, for taking our time. Thank you so much. It was lovely.
Thank you so much, Akanksha. I hope you have a lovely day.
Thank you.